That story really actually begins with my own personal story, which I'm happy to
Yeah, let's
share.
talk about that.
So, um, so I will, we don't have to get into too much detail. Happy to if you really want to, but I have my own history with mental illness from a very early age. I had all sorts of mental diagnoses throughout the years. Started with OCD as a child, um, through a variety of kind of horrible kind of family circumstances. My mother developed a very serious mental disorder, and that put tremendous stress on me and the entire family. Um, so that kind of put me in the category of lots of adverse childhood events. And and then after that, I actually really struggled a lot with mental illness. Somehow or another, a lot of that got better for me. It wasn't 100% better, but it was better enough. And I was in medical school. I did really well in medical school. I actually got an award for being one of the top students. So people looking from the outside would have said, "You're fine. Chris Palmer's fine." And uh, and I got into a Harvard psychiatry residency, and again, people would have said, "You're fine." But I was actually still getting psychiatric treatment at that point for lingering symptoms. Um, And by the time I was in my 20s, which was around that time, I was diagnosed with metabolic syndrome already. So I had high blood pressure, bad lipids, high cholesterol, high triglycerides. Um, I had prediabetes, and I'd been on a really low fat diet, and I exercised regularly, and those weren't working for me. And at some point, I decided to try a low carbohydrate diet, because nothing else was working for me, and my doctor kept trying to push me on pills, and I was thinking, if I go on pills now in my 20s, I'm going to be having a heart attack by the time I'm 40, and that's not okay. Like this is not at all an acceptable solution.
And if I could jump in, sorry for the interruption. What even placed the seed in your head that the low carbohydrate diet was something to explore? Do you remember
it,
reading anything? Do you remember coming across something, talking to somebody?
it was all quackery at that point. Actually, it was so at that point it was primarily known as the Atkins diet.
Yeah.
And this was largely seen to be quackery in the medical field, and I bought that hook, line, and sinker. I was like, "There, oh, that's a dangerous diet." All my mentors and teachers are telling me to say that and believe that, and so I believed it. But I had heard through the rumor mill, all these friends and family and other people were coming to me saying, "I put my prediabetes into remission, or my blood pressure plummeted when I went on that Atkins diet. So many things got better when I did that Atkins diet." And here I am faced with the decision to go on pills or try some Hail Mary path of a low carb diet. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to try this Hail Mary path. I actually didn't think it would work. When I set out to do it, I did not think it would work.
And when you were saying work, again, just to clarify, were you actually thinking at a time that it could help you with your mental health? Or was it more sort of, you know, was it you were looking at biological markers like lipids and blood pressure and metabolic health, or were driven by nothing wrong with this, but like vanity, like wanting to lose weight? What was the primary driver of thinking it would help?
The primary driver was my blood pressure, my bad lipids, and my prediabetes.
Got it.
That I knew as a physician, those are really a bad sign, especially when I'm only in my 20s, and I really don't want to be having heart attacks when I'm in my 40s. And I've got to do something about this. And I knew that taking pills was not a path to success.
Hmm.
Taking pills was essentially a fait accompli. If I go down that path, if I can't do this with diet and exercise, I'm screwed, is what I thought.
Hmm.
And so I decided to try the Atkins diet, a low carb diet. And I did kind of a lower. I still avoided saturated fat at that point. I was trying to, but I was eating eggs every morning, which was completely against the standard dietary advice at that point. Um, and lo and behold, within 3 months, my metabolic syndrome was gone,
Mm.
completely gone, all of it.
And because we've done a lot of episodes on this topic and we've gotten kind of deep into the biomarkers with different people, what were the things that you were looking at? So metabolic syndrome can be like high fasting insulin. It can be out of balance sort of cholesterol markers and LDL. Sometimes even people throw in things like lipoprotein B. That's more of a newer thing that wasn't kind of looked at back then. So what within that got better that you saw? And of course, as you mentioned, blood pressure.
The things that got better were my prediabetes went away. So my blood sugars were normal. Nobody that I know was measuring insulin levels back then.
So is
But
that A1C?
A1C,
Okay, A1C.
A1C was dramatically better.
And also, was that like your fasting glucose? Were you looking at that as well at the time?
I was looking at fasting glucose when I went to the doctor
Mhm.
for labs. I didn't have a glucometer or anything, but those got better. My triglycerides had been through the roof. They were over 300 and they plummeted down to about 70.
Wow.
My HDL was very low. I think it was in the 20s and it went up to 60. And that's good cholesterol for people who don't know. My LDL cholesterol actually went down. My LDL cholesterol improved dramatically. And my blood pressure plummeted in a good way. Like, not that I was dizzy or lightheaded or anything, but my blood pressure had been high. It was like 160 over, I think 160 over 100 was what it was averaging. And it went down to 110 over 70. And the fast forward on that is that pretty much I've followed a low carb-ish diet or maybe sometimes more of a paleo kind of a diet since then. And I'm in my 50s now. I don't have metabolic syndrome. My blood pressure is actually 110 over 60 usually. My pulse is in the 50s. I am a metabolically healthy person from that
You
stance.
totally changed your life around. You totally transformed your life.
Thing that I notice most, like those are all biomarkers that are silent biomarkers. You don't go around thinking about your blood pressure. You don't go around thinking like, how do I feel with my cholesterol being high or low? The thing that I noticed that was very tangible and actually no doubt in my mind led to this being a sustainable diet for me was the dramatic changes in my mental health. That I noticed dramatic improvement in my mood, energy, concentration, sleep. I started sleeping so much better. I would wake up feeling refreshed.
Was that the first thing you noticed? Like, can you remember back to that time? And if you think like the first time that you thought like, whoa, I'm really feeling something, was it the sleep?
I think the sleep probably was it, because up to that point, I had always been somebody who pushed the snooze button as many times as possible. Like I had it timed to the minute that my alarm is going to go off at 6 a.m. I can push the snooze button 4 times and not be late for work or not be late for school or whatever I was doing. And I had it down to a rhythm. And at some point soon after starting the diet, within a couple of months, I was sometimes even waking up before my alarm went off and feeling good, feeling like I think I can get up now. And that was unheard of for me, unheard of for me. And so based on that, I actually, a lot of people, friends, family who wanted to lose weight were asking me, what are you doing, Chris? You look good. You sound good. You seem healthier. You seem happier. What's going on? I'm like, try this Atkins diet. It's really, I became an Atkins salesman. I was selling this.
But it also sounds like kind of you put your own little healthy twist on it, because Atkins can be, a lot of different things. Some people think it's just a bunch of butter and other things, but it sounds like you were also having a lot of vegetables at the time.
I was.
You were also, in your own way, you were being mindful about a few things. So could you just give us a small, because people are so curious, give us like a compare and contrast of kind of what you were eating before that was driving this metabolic syndrome that you were experiencing. Like, how would you start your morning off? Would you, how much maybe sugar were you having in the day, or carbohydrates? So give us a little bit of a compare and contrast.
Yeah, no, now I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but at the
We've all been
time,
there before.
at the time, sugar was not supposed to be bad for you. It was
Yeah.
fat. Fat was bad for you. And as long as you don't eat fat, you should be healthy. So morning was always cereal. I had a bowl of cereal with low fat milk.
Did you have a favorite? Did you have a favorite cereal that you were having at the time?
Yeah, I was eating healthier. So I would eat Kashi. There was this Kashi kind of grain cereal.
7 grain cereal or something?
7 grain, yeah, because that's supposed to be really healthy for you. So I would eat that a lot. I certainly liked my favorite tried and trues, from childhood, Fruit
Yeah.
Loops and Cheerios and, uh, you know, Cocoa Puffs and all of that stuff. But
And was the milk like usually skim milk? Or?
it was skim milk.
Okay.
It was
Yep.
skim milk. I would have coffee. For lunch, I would have a turkey sandwich. For dinner, I had a lot of pasta, bread. I was on a budget, so I needed to save money, so I didn't have a lot of money for a lot of meat and fish or fresh vegetables or other things. I remember Entenmann's. So Entenmann's had this whole line of baked goods.
Yeah.
And they were healthy because they were zero fat baked
Right.
goods. So they were supposed to be healthy. So you could have donuts, you could have Danish, all sorts of things. So that's what I was eating. And according to the dietary guidelines of the United States of America, I was eating a healthy diet. And according to my physician, year after year, I was eating a healthy diet. That is the only question he asked me. How much fat are you consuming? And I could honestly tell him less than 10 grams a day. And he said, well, then you should be fine.
And your weight was probably like pretty stable, right? Like at the time you weren't overweight. And so you're not coming up as a red flag. Sure, your metabolic health markers are off, but there was no awareness about any of those and what they were connected to in terms of your body and how you felt.
Not at all. Not at all. And the point at which he started pushing medicines on me, he kind of leaned in and said, well, does diabetes run in your family? I said, well, yeah, it does. Both of my parents have type 2 diabetes. Are any of them overweight? Yeah, both my parents are overweight. I said, oh, I'm really sorry. It's genetic. It's a genetic problem. And diet and lifestyle aren't going to work for you. You need medication. And I resisted that. And again, at the time that I resisted it, I really felt like I was going against everything I was taught. And I felt like I was defying authority by doing that. The tragic thing now, in my mind, is that tens of millions of people are told exactly that same thing to this day. And they are told that they need pills. And they are told that lifestyle and diet and exercise just aren't going to cut it for them.
They're soft interventions.
They're soft interventions and clearly not working. And because you've got a genetic problem. Diabetes runs in your family, or more to my kind of profession, mental illness runs in your family. And you have a genetic disorder. And you're going to need pills for the rest of your life. And you're just going to have to accept that you have a chronic disorder. And just accept what that means for you in your life. And I now know, based on a tremendous amount of science, none of that is true.